It's the anti-checker.
We will return to your scheduled programming shortly, or we are currently experiencing technical difficulties.
I caught myself. I'm muted. I was muted. Stupid me. Pulled a bird of prey here. But good to see you guys. And as always, Mrs. Anti-Checker was first in the chat today. And there's Joe saying, no sound. You see, the stupid thing about the delay is I caught that I was muted like 30 seconds before anybody saw that I was muted. So sorry about that. Anyway, so Mrs. Anti-Checker was actually first in the chat today. A first. Richie Poole then says first, but was actually second. Yorktown says hello. Dan23 says hello. Signed Book Collector says PTL for the day he has made. PTL for the day he has made. Oh, I get it. So I'm not sure what PTL is, but at first I was like, for the day, and then I was putting like a comma in there, but for the day he has made, as in God. I get it. So it took me a minute. I'm a little sluggish right now. I'm very tired. I apologize for that. Mainly the reason I'm tired is, well, I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. In a small part, not really his fault, but small part, I was on Nerdrotic last night, which is why we had to get up early this morning and go to church. However, good to be here, as always. And let's see, just adding that, and what now? Is that like something? Thank you, babe. So PTLs for Praise the Lord. See, Mrs. Anti-Checker is much better on these internet acronyms than I am. Richie saying hi to Mrs. Anti-Checker. Let's see. Resolute says, just as I'm leaving, really? Yep. Thomas puts $99.99. Now, first of all, Thomas, that would be great. If you wanted to give me $99.99, I would be all for that. And the way you can do that is by clicking on the link in the description, and you can leave. And if you want a super chat, you can do it through Streamlabs on this channel, because this channel is obviously not monetized because YouTube doesn't like me over here. Schromer says, greetings, Rational Roundtable and fellow nerds. Hey, Schromer, how you doing? And then Bird says, Kapla. Richie is then putting $999,999,999.99. Thank you, Richie. Now, please, again, click on the link below and put those numbers in again. That would be greatly appreciated, and then I will promptly retire. There's a few comments about the mute. Sorry about that. Tom says, did you see the stream for the evil Korogan religion? I did not. I did not know. Was there a Korogan religious stream? I didn't catch it. Darn it. I've been, I don't know when that was, but like I said, last night, I was on Nerdrotic with Geeks and Gamers and all that. And then this morning we were at church, just got home a little while ago and had lunch, and then started the stream. That's pretty much been my last, 16 hours or so. Wesley said, enter greetings, turds, birds, and Cinnabon, who can't get his stream working. Oh, that sucks for Cinnabon. I hate it when you can't get it working. And then Bird is saying, praise the bird. Although, speaking of birds, and particularly speaking of, obese, fat birds that just sit around and do nothing, we have a 38-pound bird that is thawing right now for Thanksgiving. I am really, really looking forward to it. So, Mrs. Anti-Checker is a great cook. She makes an awesome Thanksgiving turkey, and we have a 38-pound bird that she is going to be cooking up in just a few days. Miss Anti-Checker just dropped in really quick, going for a nap now. All right, babe. Yeah, we're both really tired. Unfortunately, Auntie was up to her antics last night, so waking us up. Amanda Shran says hello. How you doing? Signed Book Collector says 38 pound. Wow, yeah, and that's not even the biggest we ever got. I think was about 45 pounds. That was the biggest turkey we ever had. But we usually get the biggest ones we can find. The first Thanksgiving we had together, we had a 23-pound turkey, and that was probably the smallest one we ever had. Bird is appropriating your old Sunday morning time slot with his new church stream. Well, I will have to check it out then and see if it's any good. But if all goes according to plan, eventually I'll be stealing that time slot back. Dan says, I'm introducing my mom to more Marvel Cinematic Universe. She's already seen Guardians of the Galaxy movies. She likes them. Guardians of the Galaxy is a great place to bring people into the Marvel Universe because A, you don't have to know anything about anybody else to get what's going on, and B, it's just so darn fun. So yeah, I think that's a good move there. Luke says, let's assume the universe has an origin, that this origin is a creation, and this creation is the doing of a supreme being. What makes you think it has to be the Christ? Well, that's an interesting question, Luke. But here's the thing. There is, it's not something that you can demonstrate as far as saying this plus this plus this equals, the Christian concept of what God is the exact correct rendition of God. Now, first of all, you have to come to the conclusion that God exists, that there is like those first assumptions that you make are primary. Because here's the big problem when you start saying, well, hypothetically, if you say that this is true and this is true, how do you know? Well, the problem is, unless you believe in those things and you truly believe in those kinds of things, there are other things that will simply not make any sense. And so it's one of those kind of hard to say, well, hypothetically, if you agree with this and this, because it's not a mathematical equation. It's a spiritual equation. And it's very difficult to speak on common ground if with a spiritual and non-spiritual person in any way that makes sense. The spiritual person to the non-spiritual person will come off as speaking complete nonsense. And the interesting thing about the Bible is that it actually kind of predicts that. But to the non-believer, and I'm not knocking people for being a non-believer, but it's just, assuming that, let's say that I am not delusional, I'm not crazy, and what I believe is actually true, then there are certain things that I can't relate to a non-believer, and it's just not entirely possible. And so, like, the idea of seeing God in various things to the non-believer sounds like you're just looking for something that isn't there. Mr. Miles says first. How you doing, Mr. Miles? And of course, Mr. Miles is always first because he is Mr. Miles. And so good to see you, my friend. Mr. Miles, I know, is in a particularly good mood today because the channel is still tracking well. These last couple, the Anti-Trekker channel has done really well in the last couple of days. And I'm very excited. We've had over 60,000 views in the last 48 hours on that channel. So that is very exciting. And by the way, Mr. Miles, I don't know if you've been looking at the analytics now that you have access to them, but a lot of older videos are getting new traction because of some of the stuff we've done recently. So like with that Borg video we put out, the first Borg video I did over a year ago has gotten like, I think over 1,000 views in the last day or two. So there's actually a lot going on there behind the scenes. Dan says, there was an idea for the TV show Stargate Universe. At the end, they were going to be responsible for going back in time, creating an explosion that creates everything that ever existed. That's interesting, but I don't think that would go over too well with a lot of people. Liked check-in for church. Excellent, Steve. Good to see you, my friend. Luke says, we're on Rational Roundtable here. I'm asking you to what makes you think it has to be the Christ. Your question is simple, straightforward, and doesn't require your disclaimer. Well, the reason I say it that way, Luke, is because it still makes it difficult to speak on common grounds. Why do I think it's Christ? Well, basically because I do believe that that Christ is real. That I do believe that 2,000 years ago, the events as depicted in the 4 books of the Bible we refer to as the Gospels actually happened. And the reason I believe that is based on personal experience that I can't quantify for you. That's the problem. I can't objectively demonstrate my subjective experience, if that makes any kind of sense to you. Now, here's the thing about Christ. If you've read the Bible, if you understand the stories and what Christ said and did in the stories of the New Testament, you can only come to one of 2 conclusions, assuming that Christ was 3 conclusions. 1, Christ didn't exist and was just a fairy tale. 2, Christ did exist and was in fact the Son of God. 3, Christ did exist and was a raving lunatic. Those are the only 3 possibilities. So I happen to believe that Christ did exist and is the Son of God based on personal experience that, again, I can't quantify for you because I can't allow you to experience my experiences. that doesn't roll off the tongue, but that's the problem, Luke, is that it's not something that I can demonstrate to you. It's just like how do you, trying to think of a good way to put it without getting too crass, but like, let's say, describe, oh gosh, it's really hard to try to come up with the right words for it. Daniel says, "Good day, Trigger. How are you today? What do you say to the people who say prove to be the God exists, prove to be God exists, prove to be the devil exists?" Well, if as far as God and the devil, they're not a binary. I know a lot of people think of them as they are. God is and the devil are not opposites. The devil is a creation of God and basically has no power over God. But even and from a strictly theistic position, not a religious position, proof that God exists does not prove the devil exists, because in monotheism there is only one creator, not 2. Not a yin and a yang, which is, I understand that a lot of people think that the devil is like the opposite of God, but that couldn't be further from the truth. What is your opinion on TV shows that have a character that go back in time, cause an explosion, and create everything that existed? I think it sounds silly to me, honestly. However, I do think, in a way, that is what happened with Yahweh, which is kind of funny. I think a TV show about a human doing that is silly, but if you look at the Godhead of Christianity, I think there's a certain logic there. What color turd am I feeling? Right now, definitely a red, but I don't want to ruin this beautiful sunrise picture, so yeah. But thank you for asking, Valor. Trek 95's in the house, says hello. How you doing, Trek 95? Hope your mother is doing well. Luke says, I'm not assuming I can relate to what you believe. I'm asking you to why you believe this particular God. You don't have to come up with math demonstrations, just say it. Well, I did. Because of certain personal experiences that I've had in my life, I believe that Christ is real. And if Christ is real and what he said was true, well, then the rest kind of has to be. Because if Christ, I don't believe for one moment that Christ was a super-powered being or something that was not divine. That I think I would reject out of hand. Are we still talking about the Bible? Which version? I used King James Thompson Chain Reference 5th Improved Edition 1988 BB Kirkbride Bible Company 3rd Printing. Well, you know what, Steve Rogers? I actually like what my good friend Corey Tremble, the pastor of my church, says. The best version of the Bible is the version you're willing to read. Assuming it's not a crazy fringe Bible like, some edited Bible that's trying to push a political agenda or something. I always like to know which Bible we're talking about. Well, when I talk about the Bible, generally speaking, there's a few versions that I read for casual reading type purposes, like the NIV or the ESV and a couple of others. But when I'm delving into Bible study type stuff, we're talking Greek and Hebrew, not a translation. You asked me how I know he lives. He lives within my heart. That's a good way to put it, Steve. But the problem is that you can't really describe to a non-believer what that is without it and have it make sense. Shomer says, if an SJW is alone and has their account suspended, do they still make a screech? That is a very good question. I think the answer is yes, they make a screech, but nobody cares. Yosef says, the only church I'm visiting, the only church where I'm giving a like. Well, thank you, Yosef. I appreciate that. Steve says, thanks for the forum. You're more than welcome. I love talking to you guys. So, and I'm glad that it seems like the core group of people that like to talk about this stuff has found this channel and shows up, because I didn't put any kind of announcement on Anti-Trekker. I'm not going to in the future, because this channel is mainly going to be for the Sunday morning stuff, and I'll do occasional videos when I want to springboard thoughts or whatever about my day or my week or whatever. That's this channel's purpose. I'm not trying to grow this channel. I'm not trying to make this channel into a commercial venture like Anti-Trekker, but and that's one way. And for you guys to know, I know some people have expressed fear that, oh my God, you're not going to be personal anymore because your channel is growing. No, because you know what? I'm not talking about this channel much on the other channel. Only that when people say start bringing up heavy duty political stuff to say this isn't the right place for that. All right, I'm not going to ask you to prove your belief. I'm asking why you believe. I think I expressed that now, Luke. I know it's been a couple of minutes, but as you left that 5 minutes ago. So let me tell me now if you understand what I'm saying. Wes says, restaurant. What if I could mind meld like Spock? Then would you show others your experiences? Yeah, if mind melds were possible, it would be so much easier to get people to understand what you feel, what you and why you believe what you believe. It's one of those things like ask somebody, well, why do you believe that the sun will come up? Well, you might try to argue, well, because it does and all that. Yeah, but why do you really believe that? Well, just will. Christ was a real person fathered by a human that people exaggerated for various purposes. Well, that's true. Well, if you want to say that I would kind of go to that would be Christ was not real if he was exaggerated to the point where if he was a normal person but exaggerated to basically be a divine entity, then Christ, the person Yeshua may have existed, but the Christ, keep in mind Christ is a title, not a name. The Christ never existed. Once he says, I still keep typing in Anti-Trekker. I know, that's going to be a tough one for some people. And Track 95 says, shut up, Wesley. Not saying I believe number 4, just a possibility. No, I understand what you're saying, Bert, but keep in mind, if there's a difference between saying Christ and Yeshua, right? Yeshua, or Jesus in the modern vernacular, is the name of the person. Christ is what he was. So if Yeshua was a real person that was, say, a motivational speaker or something, and then some people exaggerated and basically said he was doing miracles, then he wasn't the Christ. And so that would go back to Christ didn't exist. That's all I'm saying there. Thomas says, SOAB, I keep forgetting it's not the Anti-Trekker channel. That's all right, my friend. Cinnabon says hello. I guess you just gave up. Someone told me you were trying to stream. I'm sorry if I stepped on your toes there, my friend. Steve says, Christ is real, whether in my imagination or I'm not trying to prove my point. I'm just trying to live and love. My atheism never totally leaves me. I just keep keeping on the faith as best I can. That's an interesting way to put it. It kind of goes to, like Paul wrote, Lord, I believe, but help me with my unbelief, right? That's one thing I always love about atheists, because atheists, not reasonable people like Luke and others in this chat, but I'm talking about atheists that want to argue about, well, atheism just means a lack of belief. Well, you know what? Christians lack belief. So does that mean that they're atheists? Obviously not. Atheism is a position. It's not a lack of belief. Dan says, I saw a documentary on TV recently where a group of people believe God is at the center of the earth. Well, that's interesting. Dan says, if you've seen an illustrated Bible before, what is your favorite picture? No, I don't really get into the whole illustrated Bible thing, so no. Because none of them are accurate, so, because everybody wants to make everybody in the Bible white. Wesley, have you ever studied with someone that can read Greek and or Hebrew? Yes, a couple of times back when I lived in Oregon. I wish I could actually read the Greek and Hebrew. I wish I didn't have to have a lexicon with me to translate and stuff. But it is actually very fascinating to talk to, like, for example, I've studied with a rabbi in Portland and who was very, very versed in Hebrew. And which was really interesting because you can talk about the meanings of some of these words that people misunderstand. And Valor says, over the years, I've seen documentaries where Christ was a myth that combined everything from past religions. They showed the same characteristics that Christ later would show. But here's the funny thing about that. I've seen stuff like that, Valor, but the simple truth is that you could do that with anybody. Because if you look at the wide variety of stories in various myths throughout every culture that has existed on the earth, you could put together pretty much anything you want to. It's like Shakespeare said that there's only so many stories that can be told. And so, oh, wow, he walked on water. Well, you know what? So, they made this character walk on. Hey, they have movies now where superheroes walk on water. So, the Flash can run across the ocean. Oh, no, does that mean he's like Jesus? No, it just means that's, just a thing that you can do to try and demonstrate something miraculous. Dan says, do you like Bibles in hotel rooms? You're talking about the Gideons? I don't know. I'm not opposed to it, but I mean, I don't know if it's ultimately going to convert anybody. I don't think that that's really an effective means of evangelism. I honestly think that a better means of evangelism, Dan, is to go out and talk to people. Not to here, have a Bible, and yeah, you'll read it and suddenly magically you'll become a Christian. Now, can that happen? Sure, but I think what's more likely to happen is that those Bibles sit in the hotel room drawer and nobody ever reads them, and then there's a Christian guest there and they'll say, oh, well, that's nice, but I already have my version. And you don't see too many Gideon Bibles these days, because now you can read the Bible for free on your smartphone, and almost everybody has a smartphone. Dan got a notification for this video. Well, that's good. At least that notification is not broken. I apologize for the clip note version, just not a lot of speed. No, that's cool, Valor. I understand. Luke says, okay, fine. You don't want to share your personal experience for some reason. Gotcha. What makes this experience related to Christ? How are you sure it's not another God? Well, how do you know when you breathe, you're breathing oxygen? How do you know it's not some other gas? I mean, it just is. You know it because, obviously if you understand anything about biology, you know that your body needs oxygen to process. And I know the atmosphere isn't entirely oxygen, of course, but it's, more nitrogen than oxygen. But anyway, but you get what I'm saying. It's, that it's the, if that's the problem, Luke. It's not one of those things that's quantifiable. Like when you say, oh, he lives in my heart. Well, how do you know? If he lives in your heart, you know it. It's like, how do you know you're alive right now? Well, you just know it. Daniel says, the atheist dumbasses I talked to tells me there probably was a Moses, but he was a terrorist, and there's probably a Jesus, but he was a cult leader. The idea that, as far as atheists, I think the smarter money for atheists would be to bet against the existence of Moses and Jesus, because if they existed, you run into serious problems. If you're stuck in the middle of nowhere with a Bible and a few other people and you need to make a fire to survive, would you tear the pages out of the Bible to help make the fire? Yes. The Bible is a book. And that's something that people don't understand. The Bible is not God. The Bible is a book about God. And so do I consider the Bible, the book, a sacred item? No, it is, paper and ink and leather, if it's a leather-bound Bible or whatever. That's all that it is. Now, the messages in those words is very powerful and very meaningful. However, if it's a matter of survival, you burn it like you would burn any other book. Cinnamon was trying to stream my gameplay through Skype view screen. You probably need something like XSplit. I don't know what you use, Cinnamon, but XSplit works pretty well for that. Cinnamon says, no, just running a test. Okay. As for my personal experience, I put my faith in Jesus to forgive my sins. I'm a very different person as a result. Yeah, well, and if you do believe in that, it changes your perspective. Does it make your life better? No. And that's, I know that some people believe that, oh, well, how can God let bad things happen to good people and stuff like that? Because it rains on the righteous and the wretched at the same time. Life happens regardless of whether you believe or you don't believe. Just because you believe doesn't mean the events that affect you in your life are going to change one iota. What it does do is change your perspective on them. Not Ryan Johnson says, hello out there in YouTube land. Hey, Not Ryan Johnson. Hope you are well, my friend. Daniel says, let me make sure that's nothing major. Why do I get these stupid notifications? I need to turn off notifications on my phone. When I was born premature. I was born in 5 months. I was really, really bad shape. I needed an operation as soon as I got out of the womb, and the doctors said I I was going to die, but I survived. When I did, the doctors did not know how I survived. They were baffled. My mom used to read me the Bible. Well, but here's, and that's a great story, but here's the problem with it, Daniel, is, well, I think that, like, for example, when people say, oh, wow, God, God protected me, right? You may be right, but you don't know. And this is something, in fact, it's funny because Corey this morning at church was talking about this. We sometimes over spiritualize things, right? So he said, for example, your transmission goes out in your car. Oh, the devil's after me. Well, maybe it's just because you have a 20-year-old car and you haven't been maintaining the transmission, right? And so good things and bad things just happen. That being said, yes, sometimes God may intervene, but you'll never know with 100% certainty that God did or did not intervene. He may have, Daniel, he may have some special purpose for you, and he may have wanted to keep you alive for that specific reason. Maybe it was to reinforce your mom's faith. Maybe it was something else. But for whatever reason, you're here now, and I'm thankful for that. Steve says, I have an atheist friend who swears to me I'm not allowed to be a Christian because I doubt. LOL. I try to laugh, but I get frustrated with both self-proclaimed Christians and atheists who say this. I do as well. Because if you are, if doubt simply means you are human. Heck, one of the 12 disciples, the reason we call him Doubting Thomas is because he saw Jesus standing in front of him after he was executed and didn't believe it. So yeah, doubt is not a sin. But it is something that can lead you away, so you got to be careful of it. The way Jesus, or at least, I wouldn't say, well, it's technically, I guess, a sin, but it's not it's not something you would be condemned for. It's not like blasphemy. Are those hotel Bibles free to take? I don't know what the policy of the Gideons and or the hotels are, Bird of Prey, but I'm sure you steal them anyway. The way that Jesus, and that's how you get Bibles for your church, right? The way Jesus and how he heals people, he kind of sound like folk healers. Or folk healers were kind of trying to be like him. Just say it. Keep in mind, if you try to compare something from 2,000 years ago to someone today, then chances are the person today got the idea from the person from 2,000 years ago. Dr. Alex is here and says, hello, Anti-Tricker. Hope you are getting better. Well, Dr. Alex, has actually been a rough week. The good news is that the prognosis on my knee is good, but as far as time frame, we don't know. The quantum reality of 2042, I'm communicating from. The American Union has outlawed religion, and the poop maximizer is controlling everything. Wow, that's scary. My mom used to read me the Bible when I was in the womb, and when I was survived, and the doctors did not know how I survived. My mom says to this day, it tells me that God saved my life. Well, that may well be. And I don't have a problem with believing that. However, where the danger of that kind of belief comes in is what happens, and I'm just saying hypothetically, Daniel, let's say that this afternoon you hop in a car, you get in a car wreck and die. I certainly hope that doesn't happen because you're a nice guy and everything. But let's say hypothetically that happens. Then what happens to your mom's faith at that point? That's what scares me when people put too much emphasis of their faith on good events. You know what I'm saying? And let's see. Cuba says, scientists and matter, short story. Scientists gather before God and tell him, we now know how to make life. We don't need you anymore. It's funny. I saw, I don't know I don't remember the date, but it said, God is dead. The quote from Nietzsche. Was it Nietzsche? I think so. And then it had the date that Nietzsche wrote that. And then Nietzsche is dead, God, and the date that Nietzsche died. Was it Nietzsche that said God is dead? I'm trying to remember, but yeah, you get what I'm saying. So God leaves him alone. The scientists soon start playing in the mud to create life. As God sees this, he turns around and takes the mud away and says, get your own mud. This is mine. Yeah. That's true. The funny thing is, yeah, you can't just create. It's one thing to say, oh well, sure, you can create life, just create these perfect conditions. Uh, um, no, Mr. Miles, it's not that philosopher. It was a different philosopher, but I can't remember who it was. Um, but yeah, a lot of people will say, oh, well, we can prove God doesn't exist because in a laboratory we can create these circumstances that make it so that maybe we can get some kind of organic matter to rise up or possibly make some kind of self replicating cells that could theoretically eventually become DNA in life and all that. Okay, fine. So start from scratch then. Start from nothing and first create an environment, create the materials, create the radiation and the planetary body and all that. Let's see how that goes. Steve says, I'm not mocking atheists. I think it's a bad approach for we Christians to take if our goal is to perform really helpful evangelism. And not to follow, I do Christian stand-up comedy, and I chose never to joke down atheists or at Christians. I rather joke about my own behaviors and beliefs. I agree with you on that. And that's why I think that like leaving a Bible in a hotel room is not particularly helpful. I think having honest, open conversations is more helpful than anything else. Luke says, you place your faith in the fact. You place your faith in the fact what you've experienced was the Christ, but this experience could have been other sources, including divine ones. Was there any Christnic or Christic signature? Yeah, well, that's the thing, Luke. It's yes, I can say that the personal experiences were specifically Christ. Now, can I describe it for you in a logical, coherent way to demonstrate that? No. I wish I could, but I can't. However, that's and that's the problem is that that's as close as we can get. Mr. Miles is here saying first again. One of the reasons I like this channel show is that doubters are welcome. Absolutely. So, I mean, why wouldn't we welcome doubter? The funny thing is I had a good friend who went through a messy divorce and after the divorce refused to go to our church anymore because they didn't kick his wife out of the church. Because for some reason he thought that it was wrong that a church would allow someone who was an adulterer to go to church. And it's like, that's where they belong. Why would you push away the very people that you want to convince? That doesn't make any sense. Peter says, are you having a good day? Not really, but I'm glad to be alive. And let's see. I'm sorry if I'm trying not to skip too many, but I'm falling way behind in the chat as always. Dr. Alex says, I'm running a new video which should keep Mr. Miles happy. That makes me nervous. Valor says, actually, I was referring to the folk healers that predicted Jesus. Or that predated Jesus. Okay. Well, I don't know particularly what folk healers you're talking about. When I hear folk, I tend to think of more contemporary sources. And Mr. Miles says, I demand people worship at my idol, praise the wrench lord, the forever first. Yeah, good luck with that. We'll see if Milesism catches on. Steve likes choice. Yeah, this is my standard, I think, Sunday morning background. I just love this picture because I love the mountains. I particularly love the mountains at sunrise. My dream, if I were a bazillionaire or something, I would own a piece of property that looks something like this with a lake on it, with a cabin on the lake. Wesley says, would it be wrong to ask for a quick poll who is a believer of any kind and who is not? You can, although I can tell you that, I think that, I don't know what the actual numbers are, but okay, so what you could do is, for Wesley's sake, you can put a 1 in the chat if you are a Christian, a 2 in the chat if you are a non-Christian but theist, and a 0 in the chat if you are an atheist. I guess that makes sense. 0, 0, God. Get it? So there you go. There's our poll, and we'll see what happens, Wesley. Peter says, get in the car, wreck and die. Restaurant. Bill Murray just drove a pickup off a cliff. Groundhog Day. Well, yeah. Nietzsche. It was Nietzsche. Okay, thank you. Peter says, you've had a trim. Yes, indeed. And so it looks like, based on the poll results, we only have a couple of atheists, confirmed atheists in here, and so, and the majority are Christians, and just a couple that are non-Christians. Not sure what resolute means by 0.5. Maybe it's like kind of an agnostic-y kind of thing. That's about as short as mine now. Yeah, this is about where Mrs. Anti-Trekker prefers it. So that's why I trimmed it. And let's see. People say nonsense like we don't need God because we all have this technology and science and civilization that scientists and doctors can't stop the aging process and stop death. Well, we'll always be fighting death. That's just the natural instinct because death is a scary thing. But even though it's, the inevitable conclusion of life. But to the non-believer, the existence of life and death and all that means nothing as far as the existence of God. At least it shouldn't. Luke says, "Start from nothing. You can't obtain anything. Vacuum energy, dude. Really? Well, where did the vacuum energy come from? Everything has a source, my friend. Everything." Valor says, when I was 5, I slipped and fell down concrete steps in the basement, and from what my mom said, I hit each step with my head. My mom also said that I had many close calls with death. I'll tell you, there were a couple of times that I swear I should have died. There was like, I was involved in a really nasty accident on a bicycle when I was a kid. My parents actually, on the way to the hospital when my mom was in labor with me, rolled the car, and there were no seat belts back then. And then I was on a motorcycle heading to work and hit by a car that T-boned me. And if you know anything about motorcycles and cars, being involved in a T-bone accident at 40 miles an hour, that's like a death sentence, not a scratch. So yeah, I understand that, but does that mean the guy was protecting more, or was just lucky? Because on the flip side of that, well, my teeth are still jacked up. I'm still fat. I'm still, broke. I'm still struggling with the knee and all that. So it's like, God, if you're protecting me, could you protect me from all of it? Do you think Wiccans should not be included when it comes to listing different religions? Well, here's the funny thing about Wiccans, and even like people that want to use, and forgive me, my atheist friends in the chat, but there are some atheists that try to use things like Pastafarianism and stuff like that to try to declare that a religion as a mockery of religion. I personally do not object to anyone who has a sincerely held belief system counting that as a religion. I do have a problem with people using mockery and trying to count that as a religion just because you can. Now, I know the Supreme Court protects atheism as a religion in this country, which I understand that it's so funny because even though it's according atheists certain protections under the law, they get pissed off about it because they don't like the idea of atheism being compared to a religion. But really, it's just that's what your religious belief is, none of the above, basically. And that's fine for that to be protected. But yeah, when people start say, Pastafarianism or Jedi or crap like that and try to get it actually declared as religion, I find that offensive. However, am I going to go out there and beat them over the head and tell them they're going to hell? No. Luke says, again, it's not about me, it's about you. Last question. Could it have been another God? Could the fact that you're studying Christianity have misled you? No. Because I was not studying Christianity at the time. And if it was another God, well, here's the possibility. If it was another God, sure, if that God was trying to purposefully mislead me, I would grant you that. And I would also grant you that it could have been a delusion, a hallucination, if you will. I don't, and that's the thing. I try to live up to the name of this channel. I try to be rational. And so, yes, Could all of my experiences that involve the divine have been hallucination and delusion? Absolutely. I don't believe it is, but I absolutely concede that that is a possibility. Could be worse. I've had a lovely lamb dinner with Mom and Granddad at Sambuscus. Well, how's that could be worse? You had a lovely lamb dinner. You're like, that sounds horrible to have a lovely lamb dinner. Not sure what you mean. Nietzsche has foreseen catastrophe will come after people declare God dead. Yes. And I think that we've seen some of it. In fact, the funny thing is, and I understand that some of my atheist friends will disagree with me on that, but I think that we're seeing, like, for example, the SJW movement today is a direct result of godlessness. A direct result of godlessness. And, interestingly enough, predicted in the Bible. Read Genesis. My Nan's Chapel doesn't believe you should be with someone who has already been divorced. Well, that's an interesting one. Because according to the Bible, the only genuine excuse for divorce is, of course, adultery. Now, as far as... But here's my thing about it. The Bible also is very, very clear that we are to forgive others their sins, that we are not to hold their sins against them, and we are not to hold them accountable for their past sins. And if they are a believer, particularly once they've repented or asked forgiveness. So I don't have a problem with marrying someone who's been divorced. However, that person does need to be repentant of that, meaning that when they enter into their second marriage, they have no intention on ever divorcing again. Looks like the view from Thanos' hut. It kind of does, actually. So I guess Thanos and I have similar tastes, which is kind of scary. Except Thanos had that whole vegan thing going. I would definitely have cows around. Just saying. You kind of killed the deists in your poll. Well, that's because I'm assuming there are no deists in the group, Luke. I mean, I'm not going to say... I mean, I could have 17 choices easily if we just went, okay, how many of you are pantheists? How many are panentheists? How many of you are polytheists? How many of you are mono... no, I'm not going to get pedantic about it. Shomer says, Antrigger is nearly at 11,000, not 10K hurdle you got... over just release your potential to grow rapidly. You should make 20,000 in a few weeks. That would be great if I do. I'm not betting on it, but I will tell you, just between you guys and me, if we hit, say, 20, 30,000 by the end of the year, I will be jumping out of my shoes with joy, because that would mean that, because the way the doctors are right now, they're basically insisting that I not work until at least January 3rd. That's when they're saying I should go back to work. My ultimate dream would be that right about January 3rd, I'm making enough money off of YouTube to where I can say, yeah, I'm just not going back. That would be my ultimate dream. Now, will 20,000 subs do that? Probably not. 30, maybe. It depends, because I also got to pay Mr. Miles, and so a chunk of that goes to him, a significant chunk. But if we can get to the threshold where I can squeeze by and maybe talk Mr. Miles into letting me have a little more until we build up some, then we'll that would be so freaking awesome, because I want to do this full time more than anything else in the world. Both for the Rational Roundtable side, which is just going to be like it is now. We're never going to be pushing Rational Roundtable to become a big channel, and of course Anti-Trekker to talk about nerdy stuff and all that. Dr. X says, but just to confuse you, I am spiritual. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that, Dr. X. What does that even... How can you be atheist and spiritual? So you believe in the supernatural, but you don't believe in the supernatural? I mean, come on. Tell me. Because spiritual implies supernatural. Or do you mean spiritual meaning just mental health? Because that's not spiritual. Oh, yes, I have a Google Home Run... yes, I have a Google Home Run at Rational Roundtable. I'm asking for trouble. A Google Home Hun? Google Home... Go... I'm not sure what you mean. In Star Trek Voyager, did you not like the spirit animal thing? I thought it was kind of silly the way they... it's funny. Star Trek has always, like in the original series, Star Trek treated Christianity as if it's just fact, which is interesting because you can see, like in Bread and Circuses, and Kirk is talking about, oh yeah, Caesar and Christ, and they had them both, but not until the 20th century, and they were just acting like, yeah, it's the same old thing as everything. Whoever was like, oh yeah, not the Son in the sky, the Son of God. They were all talking about it. It's like, yeah, Christ obviously existed. However, of course, by next gen, because of Roddenberry's vision, they wanted to make sure that they pushed the atheism angle of it. But then in Voyager, you have Janeway literally get a spirit animal on screen in canon. Janeway has a spirit animal. I think it's like a newt or something, if I remember correctly. And so confirming the supernatural in Voyager. All right. Interesting. Dr. Ox says, true, even burgers have a sauce. Okay, talking about the spiritual thing. Rashford, everything has a source. God, dude, you're ruining me. Wait. Everything has a source. God, dude, you're ruining me. Sorry. I think you lost me on that one. Do you find it annoying when doctors want to heal sick children who belong to faith-healing parents? No. I find it disgusting that these faith-healing parents are ignoring their responsibilities to take care of their children. I find that revolting and disgusting. And I find it absolutely insulting that these people try to do it in the name of the same God that I believe in. So no, faith healers, it's one thing to believe, and I truly believe that God has the ability to miraculously heal anything he wants to. If God chose to, this very moment, he could have a lightning bolt strike me right now and heal my leg, and I would be able to run a marathon tomorrow. Absolutely. Do I believe that's possible? Abso-freaking-lutely. Does that mean that when you need surgery, you don't go to the doctor? No. What are you, stupid? It reminds me of a story that a pastor told. I don't even remember who it was, but it was a good little bit where they were saying, there was a man on a desert island. He was stranded all by himself. His ship had sank, and he didn't know what to do. But he was a good Christian, and he started praying to God. God, please deliver me from this island. Well, a few minutes later, a guy in a helicopter happened to be flying over, and he landed on the island. He said, oh, hey, how you doing? I saw you sitting here on the beach. I thought you might be stuck here. You want to ride home? And he goes, oh, no. God's going to take care of me. He's like, okay. And he takes off. And he starts praying, so, Lord God, please deliver me from this island. And then a boat comes by, and guy in the boat says, oh, hey, how you doing? I see you're stuck on this island. You want to ride? And he's like, no, that's okay. I'm good. God's going to take care of me. Oh, okay. So then he waits a few more, he starts praying again, doing some more good praying to God about how he's gonna get divinely healed. And then another guy in an airplane, he has a seaplane, lands on the right in front of the island, says, hey, how you doing? I saw you here. Do you need a ride? And he goes, oh, no, God's gonna take care of me. And sure enough, shortly thereafter, the guy dies of thirst because there's no water source on the island. He gets up to heaven and he says, God, what's the problem? I was praying to you. Why didn't you deliver me? He said, look, I sent a helicopter. I sent a boat. I sent a freaking airplane. What more do you want? All right? That's the point. Just because it may have a human source, like a surgeon, a doctor, chemicals, whatever it may be, doesn't mean that that's not what you're supposed to do, that it's not divinely inspired. I truly believe that modern medicine, modern physics, modern technology is, that is of God. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with any of it. In fact, I truly believe that people like Dr. Alex, while I know he's an atheist from a ideological point of view, but I think that those particularly in cosmology, are looking for the mind of God, as Stephen Hawking once said. I truly, truly believe that. All right, so sorry, that's my tangent about faith healing there. Lucky you are a Nin spokesman about some horror stories about bike accident. She was a bone nurse. Yeah, Yeah, I tell you, I felt like that was one of those moments where I thought I was going to die. I genuinely thought when that car hit me, I was like, "This is it." Short says, God never said that he will make it easy on you. In fact, he said the opposite. He said that Jesus suffered, so will his followers. We must be the best Christians no matter our state. You are 100% right, Stromer. In this life there will be trouble. That is a direct quote from the Bible. Peter says, you will get a lightsaber and beat them with it, though, as long as they have a lightsaber. I assume you mean lightsaber. Some people believe God has a gray beard, wears a robe, and is taller than anyone. Yeah, those people are people that confuse God with, what's his name? Waspinator. Let's see. Everything comes from something, yet you don't apply that to God. You'll say it's because he's outside the universe. Actually, Mr. Miles, if you paid attention to me, I actually do offer an explanation for the origin of God. And I've said that, yes, it's circular in nature, but it is actually a certain amount of logic that God, in fact, did create himself in the form of Christ. Could be worse for you. Well, definitely could be worse, yes. When I was a kid, I used to ask, yeah, but where did God come from? The best answer I always led to, he just always was. I agree with many atheists who never accepted this as a good answer. Oh, I agree, it's a horrible answer. And that's why I've said that my personal theory, and I'm not suggesting this is gospel, I'm not teaching it as fact. And by the way, thank you to a couple of you did a couple of donations. I'll get to those in just a second. Let me bring up my little dashboard since I saw that. It's nice to see that it works. And go there. Let's see. So Cuba's put in $2 saying, please do your jumping live on the stream. Please do your jumping live on the stream. Cuba, I have no idea what you mean by do your jumping live on the stream. Jumping? You lost me. And Mr. Miles, editor supreme, says, the last time I donated to a Christian-themed channel, one of the two hosts said he don't want money from an atheist. The other guy said it doesn't matter, and it was the thought that really matters. So no matter who it's from, I know which type you are. Well, I think of the gifts that you guys give me as far as donating to the channel, subscriptions on antitracker.com and all that. It's obviously I'm not a televangelist. I'm not saying, oh, you must give me 10% of your money or anything and God will bless you. No, I'm saying, hey, if you want to help out, please help out. And there's no ideological attachment to that. Other than I guess you would have to be some level of a capitalist. Anyway, so let me, and I've said it before, but Cuba says you promised to jump when reaching 20,000. Oh yes, I will definitely jump for sure on the line. I will do something. I'll tell you what. I will, in fact, Cuba, if I hit 20,000 subs by the end of this year, I will. I'll probably get a tattoo I've been meaning to get anyway, which is like the Star Trek Delta shield on my arm right here. This arm is going to be eventually a tattoo sleeve of nothing but nerdy stuff. I'm going to put my poop emoji there. I'm going to put the Star Trek, but the poop emoji I'm waiting until I hit like probably 100,000 subs. I'm going to put the Star Trek Delta shield there. I already have the tick on this arm, so that part's taken care of. I'm going to put all sorts of nerd stuff on this arm. Anyway, so let me real quick. Basically, circular but logical origin of God's story based on the Christian, and you guys know this is what I do like with Star Trek. I look at what is in the canonical information and try to piece it together, right? So in the canonical information, we know that God is a singular being but has three distinct personhoods, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, which is a little confusing to people, but yeah, it is what it is. Now, in the narrative of the Bible, we learned that God the Father was around, basically throughout the history of existence of everything. God the Son was conceived some 2,000 years ago, although it also says that he was there at the beginning, which is kind of interesting. And then God the Holy Spirit is the actionable abilities of God in a non-corporeal form, meaning that when Jesus wanted to do something, he was physically present and he would do it. However, in a non-corporeal way, the Holy Spirit interacts with us guides us, helps us to, and that's where we get into the stuff that I can't put into words for you, Luke. Now, in the narrative, so Mary was impregnated some 2,000 years ago and gave birth to a human baby named Yeshua. And Yeshua was actually, his spiritual side was divine. It was God himself. He had all the abilities of God. And as Yeshua grew to adulthood, he was then began teaching a philosophy of total brotherhood and total love and all that good stuff. And then he was executed by the Romans. However, he was able to resurrect himself and ascend to a non-corporeal form. And at that point, he exited what we call the time-space continuum. He now existed past, present, future, all as the same thing. At that point, he became God the Father, which means that now he existed at the beginning to the end, and he could, in fact, impregnate Mary, creating himself. So, yes, is it circular? Absolutely. But you guys as nerds should definitely be able to follow that kind of an idea. And so I think that makes more sense than and granted, like I said, I know to some people that, well, that's still not enough, but it's the best I can do. And you know what? It beats the heck out of just saying, well, he's always been there. And at least it's an attempt at an explanation, which is more than I can say that many atheists just simply say, oh, well, the universe just spawned out of nothing, or that, there was no before the Big Bang, which, yes, but something had to cause the Big Bang. Anyway, bonus question. Can we agree that your Christian background may have heavily led you to believe that it was Christ without question and not Shiva or any other monotheistic god? No, I would disagree with that, because, I mean, the only thing my Christian background helped with was help me recognize what it was. But I was a card-carrying atheist at the time. Cuba says, if I was a Jedi believer follower, I'd be very mad now facing these false prophets from episode 9. Yes. Jedism, as a lot of actual religions, tenets of real reigns. I don't think that it's entirely mockery. I do here's the thing, Wesley. I consider it mockery if you don't actually believe it's true. All right? So for Pastafarians, for people who claim to be Jedi, etc., they don't actually believe in the Force. They don't actually believe in a flying spaghetti monster. The whole concept is a mockery of religion. The very point of religion is that it's something you genuinely believe in. If you don't genuinely believe in it, then it's not religion. It's just fandom. I do not feel the need to prove the existence of God to any person by any means. I have no real proof. I just have my own imagination and opinions. That's the problem. Well, you can't prove. The problem with God, and this is a genuine problem, because this is one thing that atheists have a difficult time with. And this is not to be mean to atheists, it's just a fact. God is something that cannot be proven nor disproven. And so, as such, it is strictly a philosophical argument. I can't demonstrate to you God exists. I can't say, okay, here's the mathematical formula that proves God exists. However, you also can't do the opposite. The only thing you can do, and this is what some like Thunderfoot and stuff do, is they will take specific, particularly literalist translations or interpretations of biblical scriptures and try to disprove them. So, for example, the idea that many young Earth creationists believe that the Earth is approximately 5,000 years old, and so they will attack that, right? They'll attack the age of the Earth, and they'll start talking about geological evidence and archaeological evidence and stuff like that. Now, the problem with that is that even if it doesn't matter if I'm not a young Earth creationist personally. I don't have I have friends, and I know there's at least a couple of people in this chat right now that are. I don't have a problem with people who are, but that's not my belief personally. However, even if you were 100% able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt to every person in the universe that the universe is not 5,000 years old, but actually 14 billion years old. Even if you could prove that with 100% certainty, that does not in any way, shape, or form address the existence of God. All that does is address one particular interpretation of one particular passage of Scripture. And so that's the problem. You can only attack certain aspects of specific religions. You can't attack the idea of God because it's not a scientific question. It is a philosophical question. Do you like Christmas carolers at your door? Never had them. When I was a kid, I lived in the country. And then as an adult, me and Mrs. Antricker lived in the hood for a while. And now we live not quite in the country, but not quite in the city either. So it's kind of rural. And we haven't had I've never had Christmas carolers. I've gone Christmas caroling a couple of times, but never had them at my door. I see God or whatever the same height as the person they are speaking to. I'm not assuming God's gender. Okay. That's an interesting statement. Dude, YEC says 6,500, give or take. Why do you shorten it even more? Are you talking about, you're an Earth creationist are saying 6,500 years? I don't know what the current, I'm not a young Earth creationist, Wesley. So when I say approximately 5,000, look, 1,500 years difference there. So 6,500 years, fine. 7,000 years, fine. Doesn't matter because you're talking about thousands of years versus billions of years for the age of the universe. Where's the fur baby? The empty bed is sad. Well, she's actually right behind it. You can kind of see her right here, that she's lying right behind the bed. Because she knocked her bone out of the bed, and she's like chewing on the bone. Here. Come on. Yeah, see, they want to see you. All right. Vile Mike says, yes, you cannot prove the concept of a God cannot exist or does not exist, but you can show evidence that specific gods do not exist based on traits they are said to have. But here's the problem. Then all you're doing is trying to argue about specific interpretation. And that's actually a good thing, Vile Mike, and that's to a certain extent, but it's an unhealthy thing in another extent, because here's the problem. If we're going to argue over, I don't know, the global flood, or we're going to argue over a 6,500-year-old Earth versus however many millions of years old the Earth is. If we're going to argue over creationism versus evolution, those are all great. And none of them have anything to do with the existence of God. And not even to specifically the Christian God, because there are Christians that believe that the universe is 14 billion years old, that evolution took place, that don't disagree with any of what modern science says whatsoever. There are also Christians that believe that the Earth is 6,500 years old, and that and there are some Christians that believe that the Earth is flat, and all sorts of stuff that the modern atheist would simply laugh at. But that's not an argument over the existence of God. Now all you're just trying to do is say which version of God is more likely. And so if you want to argue, and that's why I get kind of mad sometimes when I used to engage in the whole atheist-theist debate a lot, I would get really mad because people would just start attacking me for things that I didn't even believe. They'd say, well, just because you think that dinosaurs and man walked together, and when did I ever say that? Dan says, do you think there will ever be a real president of Earth? I think that the Earth will eventually have a one-world government, yes. Dr. F says, Earth is only about 4 billion years old. The universe is 13.7, just saying. Yeah, I know. I was rounding to 14 billion for the universe. I couldn't remember. For some reason, I had a brain cramp. 4 billion sounds about right, but I couldn't remember the age of the Earth from the current standards. But thank you, Dr. Alex. And I would always defer to Dr. Alex, by the way, when it comes to facts like that. And so, let's see. And Mr. Miles wants to know, how long has life been on Earth? I'm trying to remember. I'm pretty sure... I don't know exactly, but... try bagpiper playing and walking down the street just after midnight at New Year's, 12:01 a.m. January 1st. Oh, I've been there. When I lived in Portland, Oregon, I On 12th and Stark in downtown Portland, a beautiful building. There's a bar on the ground floor. And St. Patrick's Day every year, they would have a bagpipe band that would play every hour on the hour all night long. Ugh. Cannot prove Zeus does not exist, but we can show evidence that lightning is not caused by humanoid throwing spears of electricity on the top of a mountain. Actually, Von Mike, see, Zeus is a very different. First of all, Zeus is a polytheistic character. And there are and the thing about Zeus is there are specific characteristics that you can in fact disprove, like you just demonstrated. According to myth, Zeus was responsible for lightning, but we know that that's not true because we understand how lightning works. However, what that is, so you could argue that the Greco-Roman mythology is patently false, right? That doesn't mean that there's no God. I would even go so far as to argue that you could disprove polytheism as a general rule. I know a lot of people don't like that, but because there are still polytheists out there. But I absolutely believe that polytheism logically is incoherent because you always have to go back to a singular creator. Valor says it's the same with pagans. Christians can neither prove nor disprove that goddesses are real or not. That's not the point. And here's the thing, is that the great divide is whether or not God/gods exist or do not. The atheist says the answer is no. The theist says the answer is yes. Now, once you get past that, then you can argue, if you're an atheist, then you're done. That's it for the whole discussion. If you're a theist, now you got to start saying, okay, so polytheism, monotheism, right? I go monotheism. I think it's the only logical choice in that matter. And then you can even get into pantheism, panentheism, and stuff. I'm actually a panentheist, which means that I believe that the universe is created of God. Not that now a pantheist is that the universe is God. Now then you get to, which by the way, some atheists are actually pantheists. They believe that the universe is a sentient being as evidenced by our own existence. But but then you go from panentheist to now you're going to start getting into specific ideologies like Christian, the Judeo-Christian faiths, and other monotheistic beliefs. All right. And once you get to that level, now it's tough. It's very, very tough. So you can examine the various holy texts and try to look at which seems to be the most logical, which seems to be the most have the least amount of incoherencies in it. But it can be difficult because you're translating ancient documents in almost every case from languages that are dead. And so that can be very, very difficult. But when you start looking at, so Christianity versus Islam versus whatever else you want to compare, you can do that level of study, but then you have to start looking at, with Christianity, the fact that Genesis can be looked at multiple ways. And one of the biggest problems in Christianity is the book of Genesis, because there are people that absolutely insist to their dying breath that Genesis is literal history, that the earth is, as Wesley says, 6,500 years old, and that God created the earth in 7 days. Now, there are others that will take a more nuanced approach to say, well, the Genesis is in fact literal, but they're misunderstanding some of the terms. So, for example, the term that's used for day, translated to day in Genesis, is actually a term called yom, and yom can just as easily mean a long era. So, like when we say the day of the dinosaur, we don't mean a 24-hour period, we mean millions, if not hundreds of millions of years. And so that the term yom can mean these ages or epochs in the Earth's evolution, and therefore Genesis can be historically accurate, but you just weren't reading it correctly. And then there are others that look at it and say, but if you look at the structure of Genesis, particularly Genesis chapter 1, it is written in a poetic form, a classic Jewish poetic format, which means that it is in fact a parable. It is not meant to be a literal history. It is meant to be an examination of the position of man and the position of God and where the earth falls in between. So that's the and so you start getting into all that. But here's the thing. To an atheist, the discussion between which of these interpretations of Genesis is correct is meaningless because they reject them all. So we go back to, does God exist or not? Peter says, you mean dinosaur deniers? Well, I don't know if they're dinosaur deniers, but yeah. Darth Revan thinks Dr. Alex is 6,500 years old. No, I thought that was my age, but okay. Time is supposed to be relative, so 6,000 and 614 billion really shouldn't make a difference. Well, and actually, one thing that is interesting, and it is in the Bible, that God himself says that time is different to him than it is to us. That a day for us is like 1,000 years to God, or something like that, or vice versa. I don't remember exactly how it says. I'd have to look it up. But so that is in the Bible. Dr. Alex says, I never said I stayed. TARDIS, dude. Ah, okay. Peter says, I learned to play drums in a pipe band. Very cool. I always wanted to learn to play the pipes because of my Scottish heritage, but I didn't want to kill the eardrums of everybody around me, so instead I play videos of Lore Reloaded singing and destroy their eardrums that way. But we believe the Christian God is also real, and he is there for those that believe in him, the same as our goddesses are there for us. Well, if you're talking from a pagan belief, here's the problem. That is an inherently contradictory belief. And, well, maybe not contradictory, but here's the thing. If you believe that, so, for example, you believe your pagan God exists, and you believe that the Christian God also exists. Have you read the Bible? Because if so, then you should already know you're on the wrong team. If you genuinely believe that the Bible is true, but this other God also exists, you should still be siding with the God of the Bible based on what the Bible says. Or you should just, do something else. I don't know. Gary, I'm assuming that is rock solid, Gary, based on the language here. It says, remember, people, smash the like button, share via social set, chat to live, turn the mic and camera on before going live. Biffed that one this morning. Donate if you can. Join the Patreon. Don't abuse emojis. And down with COPA. Oh, man. COPA, I got to do some reading on that. I see what you're getting at, but an important question is, why is there death in the world? And what was the first death and why? What is death? Well, the first recorded death would have been Abel. Cain murdering his brother Abel. And so as far as now, the biblical answer to why there is death would be because there is sin in the world and the world was therefore corrupted. And it looks like Auntie wants to go downstairs, so let me send the message to Joshua to get her. Mrs. Nature is trying to take a nap, so hopefully Joshua will get this. Please get Auntie. All right. Wesley says some people worship death, some don't even know it. That's kind of true. We know how the universe. We are how the universe knows itself, I believe is the quote. If you're talking about the idea that of a pantheist belief, an atheistic pantheist belief, which I think is interesting, that there is actually a form of theism that is not contradictory to atheism, is fascinating. So hold on just a minute, guys, while we get Auntie off her leash. I'll be right back.
Oh, what is this? A female of the skunk persuasion. She is so stunning, I must...
Hey, what are you doing? Stop objectifying that cat.
What is this? She is Le Cat? Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not know.
Oh, what? Because she's a cat, she's not good enough for you?
No. But we are not even the same species, so...
Oh, so now you're cat shaming.
No. I am just...
Get him!
That's all, folks.
Oh, so objectifying women and cat shaming is not bad enough? Now you have to make fun of the disabled? Jeez.
Thank you, Mr. Miles. I did it again. Sorry, I muted it so that you wouldn't have to listen to Auntie getting up. Although she didn't make any noise that time. So sorry about that. Anyway, what I'm saying is Aberjam. I saw your comment saying that I've skipped your comments. That was not intentional. I apologize for that. The simple fact was, if I missed it, it's human error, nothing more, nothing less. Wesley says, I see what you're getting. My poor question is, I already read that because I got confused. Mike says, Christianity is polytheistic as well. Read First Commandment. No, it says, you shall put no gods before me. However, here's the thing. And this is where you really have to get into the Hebrew text and stuff like that. First of all, most of that is talking about idolatry. All right. Idolatry is to put a god before God. Does that God mean a literal, breathing, living God? No. Money, it can be a form of, the love of money is a form of idolatry. But as is worshiping celebrities or politicians and stuff like that, which is what we do in the United States a lot. But no, Christianity is not polytheistic. In fact, if you look at, there are several examples of people who worshipped other gods in the Bible, and they would say their God's going to perform these miracles, and nothing would happen. Why would God design a system where the sewage line is right next to the entertainment system? Someone's been paying attention to Neil deGrasse Tyson. Why not? How brilliant is that? People believe, and in fact, and I think you got it wrong there. It's the sewage line is the entertainment. Well, one of the waste disposal systems is in fact the entertainment system. And I'm sorry, that's brilliant. And especially if you consider that the waste product in question that actually goes through the entertainment system is in fact has a disinfecting quality to it. Very interesting. Wonder how that happened. Yeah, people believe Genesis literally rational. That's part of the problem. Well, that's the thing. But you know what? I don't begrudge people that take it literally as long as they don't get mad at people that don't. Because to me, it's one of those minor issues. I don't think your salvation is dependent on whether or not you believe in a literal or figurative interpretation of Genesis. Darth Maul says, I took a college course, Theology of God in Religion, and another course of philosophy from classic Greek up until this modern times, and says that's part 1. And then the chat skipped ahead. I don't know where. The concept of God has been debated for so long, but most people conclude that there is some unseen mover or force in our existence. Well, most people believe that there is something out there. People will disagree on what it is. And I think that's, and no offense to my atheist friends like Dr. Alex or Luke or Mr. Miles, but I do think that it is somewhat self-apparent. Self-apparent? What's the term I'm looking for? But you guys know what I'm saying. That it's self-evident. That's the term I'm looking for. That something caused existence. Something started the whole thing. And so the problem is that some people will say, well, it's an unwarranted assumption to think that it is a living thing. Other people think, oh, of course it's a living thing. And that's where the first breakdown of our great debates takes place. Trek 95 says, ages or seasons. Yes, the term yom can mean an age, a season, a 12-hour period, or a 24-hour period. All those are correct uses of the term yom. And let's see. And John says, hell is a real place. It's armed combat warfare. Those who live through it get it seared into their souls every day and night. Well, if you're talking about the hellish nature of being in a combat zone in the military, that is definitely hellish, but it is not hell. And the funny thing is, hell is a horribly misused word, because hell actually just means afterlife. And you should always look at books of the Bible with a modern thought, restaurant, or a pinch of salt. I don't know if I would say a pinch of salt, but you need to try to put it in proper context. I'm currently diving deeper into the details of electric plasma universe theory. Very interesting stuff. Google for Project Sapphire. I will when I don't have time for that right now, but it does sound interesting. The Bible is a great historical book on how people lived. Actually, there is a good deal of that, but the problem is there's also references in the Bible that if you don't understand the ancient societies, don't make a lot of sense. For example, there's in my humble opinion, a horribly misused term where Christ talks about loving your enemy. It's like heaping hot coals on his head. And people say, see, it's because it's saying, oh yeah, if you love your enemy, yeah, they just don't, they get so angry and so worked up because you're being nice to them and they don't know what to do, and it's like you're just burning them, right? Except that's not what that term means. That term is actually used because back then, at the time that was written, many people lived in the desert where it got really, really cold at night, and they would put hot coals into a sack and put it underneath where they would lie their head when they would sleep. It was a way to be comfortable. I spent yesterday dampening my mini drum kit by sealing soft toys inside. That sounds like torture to your soft toys. In a child's science book, you would not include technical equations or 600 pages of techno jargon. That's why universal concepts are described by parables in the Bible. I agree. The Bible is not meant to be a scientific textbook. And it's actually not even meant to be a complete historical record. It's meant to basically be a book accessible by the average person to understand the basic concept of the mind of God. If you want to dig really deep into the mind of God, become an astrophysicist. I do not feel the need to argue over the flood or creation. My job is to preach Christ. If the audience wants to accept Christ, then fine. If not, fine too. Hey, if they want to go to hell, fine. Well, I don't want anybody to go to hell. And I know you don't either, Steve. But no, I understand. And yeah, I think that arguing over the flood is a pointless debate. And that's why I get upset when atheists try to push that argument on me. Because I'm not, argue with somebody who believes in it. Are we not supposed to use emojis in chat? Well, not necessarily. I think my understanding is, talking to a couple of people, is that there's a problem in the YouTube algorithm right now to where if you use a lot of emojis, certain people have, in fact, had their accounts deleted by the algorithm because of it. So, don't know why, but yeah. Dr. Ox says, check Discord. I will after the stream, not before. The drivers behind the EU are engineers, not religious folks. They strongly disagree with much of the current messed up, unlogic, math-only centric science dogmas. Well, I don't know much about how the EU works, but I do know that the United States, atheism is the fastest growing religion. Wesley says, finish that verse you were quoting. Never hear anyone finish it. Which verse was that? Because that was a while ago that I was saying. That was 10 minutes ago, so I'm not sure what you mean. And Jeff put in $1, says, take 10 of my income after wife taxes. Wow, Joseph, your wife has a very high tax rate. But thank you, my friend. Average Jeff says, greetings, brother. Only a week in the 10K club and already shilling that Geeks Plus Gamers merch. I always knew you were a sellout. Actually, the funny thing is, and this is a cool thing about being in the 10K club, I can now sell merch on my page. So I'm working on getting that set up. And in fact, I have a great idea for my first shirt. It's going to have just the turd logo there, and it'll say, you're a piece of crap, and so am I, #MePoo. Dan says, what would happen if everyone died at once and is there enough room in heaven? Well, actually, Dan, interesting question, because nobody's in heaven right now, if I understand my basic theology correctly. And that's something that a lot of people have misguided sense of. Like, you always hear at funerals, oh, they're in a better place now. No, they're dead. Oh, but, they're up in heaven with their wings. No, they're dead. Based on what the Bible actually says, when you die, you are dead until a specific event referred to as the resurrection. At that point, everyone who ever lived will be resurrected, except for the saints who have already been resurrected. But everybody, all the regular folks, will be resurrected and judged. hence the term Judgment Day. But the time between your death and Judgment Day could be a week, it could be 100 billion years. Nobody knows the exact date. However, to the person who dies, whether they die today or they die a million years from now, it'll feel instant to them, just like if you go into a coma and then wake up 100 years later, it feels like it's just been a second. Well, and so yeah, I don't think we have to worry about there being enough real estate in heaven, though. How would you convert an atheist like me? I have said all it would take is one piece of evidence to convince me of God, but what that is, I do not know. But since God knows all, well, first of all, Vile, you shouldn't say that, because that's not true. One piece of evidence, there's lots of evidence, right? There's plenty of evidence that, for example, there actually was a person who we commonly refer to as Jesus. His name was actually Yeshua, who lived around 2,000 years ago, for approximately 3 years, preached a message to people and was so inspirational that he created a religious movement that to this day is the largest single religious movement in the world. That is a piece of evidence that it is true. Is it proof? No, it's evidence, right? It's evidence that something did indeed happen 2,000 years ago, because all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this religion just began and grew like wildfire. You also, and of course, as far as the convictions of the people that originally founded the religion, there's documented evidence that these people were all executed because of their beliefs. They could have renounced their beliefs and avoided execution. If they actually believed or knew that what they were teaching was false, they probably would not have been willing to be executed for it. That is more evidence. You also have the anecdotal evidence, but that is evidence, it's testimony that people experience God in various ways on the earth today, right? So there is lots and lots of evidence. And then, in fact, some people say evidence is the existence of reality itself. Why does the world exist as opposed to not existing? Especially if we consider that the universe has a timer on it. And when I say that, I mean that, of course, ever since Hubble discovered the expanding properties of the universe, we knew that the universe had a finite number of days in the past. Now, granted, Christians knew that all along, right? And so did Jews and Muslims, of course, because we all agree on the book of Genesis for the most part. But the idea that there was a finite point in the past that God said, make it so, and the universe existed. Right, so at least the Judeo-Christian faiths have always believed in a finite universe. The universe began at a specific point in the past, whereas common belief was that the universe must be eternal up until we discovered that it was expanding, because if it's expanding logically, it would have to contract if you go back in time, and eventually you go back in time enough, and it reaches a singularity, blah, 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 blah. Dr. Alex can explain that better than I can. So evidence is all around you. Whether you accept it, that's up to you. And I'm not going to be able to convert an atheist. I'm not claiming to convert atheists. All I do is talk about what I believe as calmly and rationally and frankly as I can, because one thing that I think that this world is missing is people that are both articulate and educated on matters of religion and willing to have frank discussions. And so that's one of the reasons I created this channel in the first place, the Rational Roundtable channel. So Valor says, the thing is we believe that your God is real, not that he is for us, and neither are wrong. We don't just believe one going to be punished because Christians don't believe in her. Right, but here's the problem, Valor. You can't have two supreme beings. That is a logical contradiction. Is it okay to celebrate the pagan feast of solstice? If you want to. And the Bible does say that, yeah, you can eat meat that's sacrificed to idols. What is not okay is to do that in front of a fellow believer if it causes them to stumble. 2 Peter 3:8, but do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. Thank you, Wesley. I couldn't remember the scripture, but thank you. And then there's the sound of silence. Yeah, I screwed that up. Wesley says 2 Peter 3:8 is basically saying God's outside of time, not bound by it. I agree. And but that also goes to the idea that, like, if you want to interpret Genesis as being longer periods of time, 6 days, just based on that, if you really want to be a literalist and say, well, it only says 1,000 years, but still that 6 days now becomes 6,000 years instead of 6 24-hour periods. I'd like to thank all the Christians here today for not hunting down myself, Mike, Dr. Alex, and the rest of the atheists here, and, not stoning us to death. Thank you. Well, you know what, Mr. Miles? As real Christians, we believe in grace, and that means that we don't stone you to death. Valor says, I apologize if my comment came off as nude. It does kind of sound like it, and I didn't mean to come off that way. No, not at all, Valor. Don't stress over it. And I missed Vile said, believers are able to hear from God. Believers are able to hear from God via prayers. Why don't people pray that God tell them what evidence is so they can tell me? Well, that's an interesting. Prayer is a weird thing. Prayer is not what a lot of people think. It is communing with God, but it's really. Here's the thing about prayer that people misunderstand. Prayer is not about, hey, God, could you do me a favor and do this, and this for me? I'd really appreciate it, right? That's not the point of prayer. I mean, people do it all the time, but that's not the point of prayer. The point of prayer is to align yourself with God, not to convince God to do what you want. Does that make sense? So, yeah, I would love it if God gave me some magic thing to tell Vile Mike to convince him and the Vile Child that God was 100% real. And here, all I have to do is say this word, and they're going to drop to their knees right now and confess and blah, 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 right? That would be great. But that's what I really want when I pray is, God, let me do what it is that you would have me do. And in fact, I will be completely honest with you guys. Me sitting in this chair right now is a direct result of prayer. And I mean that quite literally. I truly believe that God led me to revive the Rational Roundtable channel, to use it as a springboard for conversation, and to do exactly what we're doing right now. I was asking God, and hey, and this was before the recent growth on the YouTube channel. This was, a couple of months ago, when I've been off work and I'm starting to feel a little bit of energy to be able to do stuff. And I was like, you know what, God, if this YouTube thing is what I'm going to be doing, if this is going to be really my career, is there something I need to be doing for you with it? And I started doing the Sunday morning shows. But then as time went on and all the pressure started coming about, Google crushing on religious and stuff. And I was like, God, what do I do here? And basically, it was like, well, you already got this Rational Roundtable channel set up. Use that. And here we are. So I will tell you that me sitting here on this channel, the existence of this channel is a direct result of prayer. But it's not me asking God, hey, do me a favor and give me 10,000 subscribers, right? That's not how I did it. I simply said, God, what should I be doing to do your will with what I'm doing? And I felt led to do what we're doing right now as an attachment to the anti-trekker. And there's a reason for that too, is that a lot of you guys, particularly the atheists out there that like to join us, would not listen to anything I had to say if I just started a religious channel and started talking about it, right? But we built a relationship, a trust, a fellowship through nerd culture that now we can talk about other things and not feel like it's an us versus them. We're all still the nerd culture. We have some differences on religion, but that's okay, and that's why we're here talking about it and having a good time. Let's see. So are you saying that God's perfect world, when translated, creates vagaries? I'm not sure about the meaning of said perfect word, or first commandment is written in English is right, polytheistic. I'm not sure exactly what you're saying there. Am I not an atheist friend? Well, if you're an atheist, then I would consider you an atheist friend. I'm speaking only as a Christian and not for all Christians. Neither are all atheists. I also know nothing of Islam or other religions besides what I see in movies, TV, and YouTube. Um, oh, very cool, Mr. Miles. Thank you. I guess we just crossed 11,000 subs on the Anti-Trekker channel. Thank you, Mr. Miles. I didn't realize we'd hit that. I knew we were getting close because when I went to church this morning, we had broken 10,800. So yeah, it's amazing. The growth has just been great. And I do thank God for putting me here at the right time for this to happen. And if it's what He ultimately wants, woohoo, awesome. Or you know what? If I'm completely wrong and all my beliefs on God are delusion, and it just happens to be that I'm growing in subs, woohoo, awesome. Mr. Ross says, I find the idea of the universe being sentient because we're all part of the universe to be a fascinating thought as well, but I've never examined it in detail. Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea. I would actually, if I were an atheist, I would probably be more along the lines of a pantheist like that. Aberjam says, these scriptures were written such as they can be understood simplistically and deeply intellectually. It's all things to all men. Yeah, but it can be very, very difficult too. So yeah. Because the problem is that when we translate and we have differing interpretations and stuff, and then we end up fighting about it, and that's why the church is splintered so many times. Peter Quinn says 10K, congrats! Oh, you didn't know that? Yes, Peter. Well, 11 now. Missed the boat. By the way, I'm thinking of, since I can do a merch store on the channel now, I'm actually thinking about making the first shirt that we put up there a limited edition. I was there when he hit 10,000 kind of thing. Cuba says EU equals electric universe. Ah, thank you. Nobody will buy a shirt with a turd. And I'm face palming right now, a double face palm. Yeah, and you thought everybody was going to unsubscribe when I said why it was called Anti-Trekker. You were wrong about that. The subscription rate has gone up, my friend, and that video is doing very well. It's over 6,000 views now. Nightbreeze in the house. How you doing, my friend? Valor says, when my ex's grandfather, just before he died, his last words were, I need to go. I have to catch the boat. If he is dead, what did that mean for him? It mean that as his brain was shutting down, the neurons made him think he had to catch a boat. I mean, that's the thing. I know that people talk about, well, what about the light and what about this? And you know what? The funny thing is, atheists already have answers for that. They already talk about the fact that when your brain shuts down, sometimes people see what they want to see. Sometimes they see what they fear seeing, whatever. That's your brain shutting down. That has nothing to do with it. In the Bible, the city of God, not including the new earth, the place where you live in heaven, is 2,400 kilometers square and rises 2,400 kilometers high. Plenty of room for everyone who ever lived. Absolutely. And that's something that people don't understand is that, yeah, they even give the dimensions of the city, and there's way room to spare. I think you can add the people who choose death rather than refusing the tenets of I think you can add the people who choose death rather than refusing the tenets of Christianity. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, Mr. Lundell. Maybe I'm missing some context there. The cold death of the universe. I know that's the given theory of how the universe will end, assuming that there's not some kind of external force, which is what Christians believe. I do not find that evidence strong enough to convert me. Do you consider that a failure of me or the evidence? Neither. But that's why I said, but don't say, if I just had some evidence, because there is evidence, you just don't find it convincing. Other people will see the same evidence and find it convincing. And the problem, and this is actually, it's a very interesting statement, and I know some people find it annoying, some people find it contradictory, some people find it stupid, but it's, to me, true. And something that, again, the pastor of our church said, this was a few months ago, believing is seeing. As opposed to the old saying, seeing is believing, right? I see this, therefore I believe it's real, which is the way we generally think about the world. But when it comes to God, when you believe in God, then you can see him. And I know that sounds weird and contradictory, and some people say stupid, but it's absolutely true. God is Captain Picard. Make it so. That would be horrible. Jesus' resurrection was one of the best established facts historians find in human ancient history. Watch Gary Habermas. I don't know Gary Habermas, but I do know, yes, there's more documentation of Jesus' resurrection than the existence of many other people that we take for granted from ancient history. A certain man created a religion 53 years ago, and we all signed to it, and we have scriptures to talk about it. Hashtag Star Trek. Well, just watch Futurama to know the future of it. Just don't get the Star Trek Wars confused with the Star Wars Trek. Do you believe at the end of the universe things restart and happen as they have happened before? No, I believe in the biblical account of the end of the universe, that eventually the universe will be wiped away. A new universe will be put in place of the old universe. That's how the Bible describes it. However, the new universe will not be exactly the same. However, it will be a physical, corporeal existence. However, it'll look more like this than, the crap we see in most of the world today. Well, if you want a roundtable, I'd be willing to have a roundtable discussion. Absolutely. Well, that's something I do want to set up in the not too distant future, especially if the Anti-Trekker channel does begin to support us full time. I will start having roundtable discussions on this channel, like on a regular basis, kind of like Nerdrotic does with Friday Night Tights. Have a rational roundtable discussion once a week where we can have people of differing beliefs, and I would love to get young Earth creationists, flat earthers, atheists, and people of differing religions as well. If we can get some Muslims or some Jews or even Hindus and anything else we can get to have these discussions with the agreement that yes, we can fight passionately, but we are going to be respectful of each other. We're not going to be mocking and insulting. And at the end, we all shake metaphorical hands and are still friends. I do not like the song Imagine by John Lennon. I think John Lennon is one of the most overrated performers of all time. I've never really particularly cared for John Lennon or, honestly, the Beatles. There's a couple of Beatles tunes I like, but I think generally they're overrated. You said the moment you put up the Christmas tree and give gifts to your family, you're celebrating a pagan feast of the solstice. Yes, I know. But you know what? Does that make you a pagan? No. I do know there are some like for example, my father-in-law, loved the guy, great guy, Lewis, and he will not celebrate Christmas for that very reason. And fine, if you don't want to celebrate Christmas, I certainly understand that. Now, to me, Christmas is because you know what? I live in the United States, and this is U.S. law, right? Signed into law by the President of the United States, making Christmas a federal holiday. It is a secular holiday that celebrates the philosophy of Christ. That is actually what Christmas is in the United States. So if you have a problem with that, okay. God is not a magic 8-ball. Very well said. Presley says, how long can plants live without sunlight, without God keeping them alive by pure God power? Not sure what the point of that was, Wesley, but okay. Thank God for you starting this channel, Rational Range Rover, for you mostly. Thank you, Peter. Aberjan says, 1 Peter 3, 19-20, by whom he also went and preached to the spirits in person who formerly were disobedient, when once the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah. Not sure what the point there, but I didn't catch what John DeMarco said earlier. Peter says, heard you got arrested in 2009. Yes, that is absolutely true. If you search for Rational Ryan, you will find like some people mirrored some of my old videos. And yes, back in 2009, Homeland Security accosted me and detained me briefly and then offered to let me sue the guard that actually did that. And I declined. I knew he was just trying to do his job. He was overzealous, and I told him, look, I forgive the guy, but, maybe you should teach him how to do his job properly. Because he was basically, I was in a public-owned facility recording myself and nothing else, and he tried to basically physically detain me and force me to stop recording, which inhibited my freedom of speech. And so, yes, I absolutely could have sued him and sued the security company that worked there, but I chose not to. But I did put that video up. Do you hear God's voice speaking to you? Not in an audible sense. I think that, and the thing is, John, God, I believe, communicates to different people in different ways. I've never, quote unquote, heard God say, "Hey, Mike, here's what I want you to do today." You know, I'm not Ned Flanders. That's not how God works with me. Now, I know some people that claim that that is exactly how they hear God. Like, you know, they get up in the morning, they pray, "Hey, God, what should I have for breakfast? You should have Cheerios today." Okie dokie. You know, I've never, ever experienced anything like that. But I do think that God speaks to us in more subtle ways. And the thing is that to really hear God, you have to be open to it, and it's more, and it's, you can tell when you are in tune with the Spirit. And that's why I said earlier to Luke that I couldn't really describe to him what it was, because I can't like put into words what that feeling of attunement is. And in fact, I think that's the best way I could describe it, is it's just a feeling of attunement. Thomas says, you made this channel because YouTube hates your particular religion. Actually, I made this channel many years ago in order to be an open forum for people of differing beliefs to have a discussion on it. I was actually, my original YouTube channel was Michael J. Crawford. Then I changed it to King Theist 23 as a response to an atheist named King Heathen, who I used to like to argue with. And King Heathen said, wow, you have a lot to say on this. You should start your own channel. So I did. But then I thought King Theist, boy, that seems a little pretentious and everything. So then I created a Rational Roundtable with the idea of this is a place for us to be able to just talk. And but then I kind of let it go, and it just sat on the wayside for a few years. And then I started the anti-trekker thing. The first time I really became successful on YouTube was with the anti-trekker channel. And here we are now, a few years later, and I brought the Rational Roundtable out of mothballs, and we're having this conversation. Peter says, 11,000, congrats again. Thank you. I'm very excited. Wasn't the movie Star Trek Final Frontier dealing with the idea of God? I remember thinking Kirk was wondering about if this guy was actually God for a minute. I'm Star Trek TOS movie-based normie. Yeah, well, yeah, they were looking for God in the middle of the universe, or in the middle of the galaxy. It was really stupid, though. And then at the end, Kirk's like, well, maybe God's not out there. Maybe he's in here. You know, all right, whatever. I mean, talk about your pop culture theology, whatever. Schromer says, congrats, thank you. Vile says, just going to listen in for now. Got to shave sensitive bits. And by that I mean my scalp. Okay. Whew. I was almost going to say I did not need to know what you were doing with that. And plus I'd be cracking a joke and then, you know, that would be hilarious. Valor says, it's like how I feel. I feel that God has helped me survive so that I could meet you and everyone else so I could learn more about another faith. Fair enough. And I'm not going to debate you about the goddess. Not my cup of tea, but and I would probably argue the same thing that many atheists would argue to me. I haven't had, you know, I have not felt any evidence or anything like that the goddess exists. Now, does that mean that it is completely impossible that you are in touch with a feminine aspect of God or something that wants you to do something differently than wants me to do? No, it's possible. God can do whatever the heck he or she or they or it wants. I shouldn't say they, because I do believe there is only one God. I think that's a logical axiom. With your recent statements, I wonder, do you believe God sent me to you? If yes, I'm so going to take advantage of that. Then I will not answer that. Cuba said, by the way, this channel is not even linked for my anti-trekker channel, or did I miss something? How is anybody supposed to find this? Well, a couple of weeks ago when I started the Sunday morning live stream, I actually put a video on the anti-trekker channel saying, hey, the Sunday morning stream is going to be on this channel, and a link to the stream. I'll probably do it again maybe next week or something, and every once in a while, but I'm not going to do it all the time because the goal of this channel isn't to get subs. The goal of this channel is just to be able to have these conversations and to get deep into it. Honestly, I don't want to have 1,000 people watching one of these live streams, because then I wouldn't be able to respond to all of your guys' stuff. I'd love to have 1,000 people on the live streams on anti-trekker, you know, just thinking dollar signs and greed and all that. Maybe we should pray for Michael J. Pullard at the end of the stream and thank him for his performance. Okay. You lost me on that. I want a shirt that says, I remember the Borg videos. Hey, there you go. Maybe do that at the end of every Sunday stream. Pray for Michael J. Pullard. I don't even know. Who is Michael J. Pullard? And let's see. Babylon 5 does the atheistic spiritualism very well. The universe became sentient and split itself apart to know itself better. But then that would, see, the problem with that is that if you want to argue that, for example, the sentience of humans is evidence of the sentience of the universe, fine, but then the universe itself can't make a conscious decision because the sentience is divided into all these small things and they don't collectively make a decision, they individually make a decision. And let's see, near-death experience is a field of research. You got to look at Gary. And that's the, I'm not going to argue about it, but that's the way I look at it as far as, well, it's just a near-death experience. Andrew, the new trailer for Christ on Infinite Earth popped up, but if they destroy Earth 89, you'll still watch Tim Burton Batman movies knowing the universe does not exist. I honestly will not care, because I will tell you, Daniel, and I know you're excited about what the CW is doing, but I don't like the CW's interpretation of many of these DC characters. So if they do Crisis, to me, that's not... Crisis on Infinite Earths only exists in one form, and that is comic books. What they're doing isn't Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's something that's kind of a cheap imitation. Question: what is it that the Christian God? Well, why is it the Christian God's viewed as a personal God, theism, but when it comes to proof, there's nothing personal about it? Well, no, that's the problem. Is the proof is all personal. It is subjective in its very nature. The common Christian-y term that people say is, Christianity is not a religion; it's a relationship. That's very true, and the problem with that is that I can't objectively demonstrate a relationship unless the other person in the like, for example, I can't unless you were in the room, Mr. Miles, either in a chat room like this or physically with me, I can't prove my relationship with you. I can only talk about my side of it. It's kind of like that. Imagine that if the only way that you can interact with God is if you have a relationship with God, and then you ask another person who has a relationship with God to prove it. Get some Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, I've actually had some good talks with Jehovah's Witnesses. They're interesting folks. The round table seems good, Restaurant. I may have problems streaming, but I have no problems with someone else streaming for me. Yeah, and that's the thing. I would love to. That it'll be a lot of fun. It'll take time to get the logistics of it set up, but I do think once we get the Anti-Tricker channel to where it's supporting us enough, then I'm going to start pouring a little bit more energy into setting that kind of thing up. Darren says, so how's your blood pressure? About normal. No, don't know. Why? Do you think I'm worked up? We are discussing paradise or Abraham's bosom, with Catholics misinterpret as purgatory. Ah, gotcha. So God refers to you as Mike. I always use Michael. Well, that's because you're not God. Only God can call me Mike. No. Sue the company, not the man. He would have got sacked, but you could have settled out of court for much less than what you were due. Yeah, but you know what? I wasn't interested in harming him or even harming that company. I was more interested in getting my daughter's Social Security taken care of. That's what we were there for. And I think that the guy made a mistake, an honest mistake, and I don't want to take away his career for that. I just want him to be properly trained, and hopefully he was. Genesis describes the planet and seeds made on day 3. The sun, the moon, the rest of the universe were made on day 4. If a day was a long period of time, how long can plants live? Well, Wesley, that's a good question. But that's, I don't defend the young Earth model, so I'm not going to answer it because that's not my beliefs. Let's see. John says, what do you think about stealing people's work and giving them no credit for it? What, like on YouTube or something? I'm against it. I stand for copyright law. I wish we would have seen those old videos. Well, Wesley, they weren't that good. Some of them were good, but not all of them. I like the story of the conversion of the Ethiopian eunuch. Yeah, I actually like that too. The premise being, that Christ died, went there and preached the gospel for 3 days, then released the righteous from a spiritual waiting place. Gotcha. And that's where the idea of purgatory came from. I've had the experience, and I don't know, purgatory I think is, yeah, I'm not a big fan of it, but hey, I'm not Catholic, so I'm not going to defend it or really attack it that much because it's just not a concern of mine. I've had the experience of a message from God. I was visited by angels telling me my brother was okay. My brother was in Iraq and a mortar landed within feet of him. It was a dud. Whew. Well, I'll tell you, there's only one time in my life, and I'm being absolutely serious about this. because, you know, I told you, God doesn't like talk to me like, hey, how you doing? That kind of thing. But there's one time in my life that completely out of the blue, and this is why I am a believer today, was this moment was the first moment that I realized that there's something out there. It took me out from atheism to kind of a soft agnosticism. Was the December 23rd, 1987, when I first saw Mrs. Anti-Trigger. And I knew for an absolute, and it's funny because everybody that was involved can testify to this, but they thought I was freaking nuts. But I absolutely knew, beyond, not like, oh, I suspect, oh, I want. No, I knew as if it was already a foregone conclusion, an absolute fact, that I was going to marry Mrs. Anti-Trigger the moment I laid eyes on her. And, that was definitely from God. Now, it was as far as how did I know, I can't describe it to you. And it's another thing, I know, Luke, I'm glad you're back, but it's another thing where I can't really describe to you how I knew. I just knew. There was no doubt in my mind whatsoever. And I told everybody that I knew that was an absolute fact. And everybody thought I was freaking nuts. Especially Mrs. Anti-Trigger. My new name shall be Joan of Wrench. I've been sent by God. Oh, Miles. Michael Poehler was the eldest child. Many other roles in film and Texas in the TOS episode with the adult viruses. With the adult viruses? Oh, you're talking about Miri. Ugh, hate that episode. So, yeah. If you want to pray for Michael J. Pollard, you can. But bonk, bonk on the head. That's what I do. I feel my conscience is connected to quite a few of you humans. Really, Dr. Alex, and what species are you? I'm just wondering. Well, I'm looking forward to Crisis on Infinite Earths. I haven't seen the comic one. The comic is one of the most epic comic book stories ever told. It's a 12-part comic book story. I'm sure you can get it in a graphic novel form somewhere, in which basically DC was cleaning up their continuity by wiping out all their alternate realities and stuff. And it is very well done, and there's some incredibly dramatic moments. And in fact, I will argue the only time that the character of Supergirl was actually written and done well was Crisis on Infinite Earths. Unfortunately, she then promptly died. Still shaving the dome, but wanted to say before I go, new TOS review will be posted tonight between 5 and 6 and have a special guest. Oh, very cool. Who's the special guest? Not anybody I know, is it? Wouldn't be anybody that happens to look or sound like a turd, was it? Jehovah's are great people, strange beliefs on blood, though. They have a few strange beliefs. Luke says, I'm saddened by the fact you haven't read my comics on this very channel yet. You have seen is exactly how I describe faith, a personal relationship and trust between you and God. I'm sorry, Luke, and you know what? I will be completely honest with you. And just when it comes to this stuff, I am so it's like, I feel bad because it's becoming harder and harder and harder to keep up with this stuff. When it comes to like comments, my God, there are literally thousands of comments that have come into me over the last 48 hours, right? And granted, it wasn't in the thousands, but still it's in the hundreds of comments that would come in, daily or week and thousands weekly for the last several months. And it's almost impossible now to keep up. And the problem is then I forget that I got to switch over between the other channels and stuff. And it's like, and I fall horribly behind. So I'm not passing the buck. I'm not blaming anybody but myself, but I do feel horrible about the fact. But the honest truth is, Luke, I am but a human. But I will try eventually to get to I know I got a bunch of comments on this channel that I got to catch up on. My great-grandmother was a hardcore Jehovah's Witness. My father, a Southern Baptist. My mother, Wicca, or pagan as she called it, but just Wicca to me. My sister is a typical Christian. My brother thinks he alone understands the Bible. How I ended up an atheist is a mystery. No, it's not. Not a mystery at all to me. What you see is a bunch of conflicting beliefs that, and probably a lot of hypocrisy within those conflicting beliefs. That's part of the reason that like I said, Mr. Miles, I was an atheist for a substantial portion of my life. And no small part of it was because of what I saw in the churches. Peter says, well, it's 8:45 here. I'm going to log off, watch War of the Worlds. All right, my friend, have a good one. I hope War of the Worlds is freaking awesome. Which should inform you how good atheists can understand you. How well. Hey, Luke, you know what? If I didn't think you, first of all, you don't have to say good atheist because, you're just an atheist. You're a good person. All right. So, and by the way, let me say one thing on that, because I know somebody's going to try to point out that scripture that says that there's no good people. That's a different level of good. It's comparing you on the godly scale. Nobody is good in comparison to God, right? God, the standard is perfection. Nobody reaches that perfection. However, are there good people versus bad people? Yeah, on a humanistic scale, absolutely. And I've always thought you as a good person, Luke. So, yeah, just putting that out there. Catholics don't think Abraham's bosom is purgatory. Purgatory is a temporary hell you get out of. Abraham's bosom is where devout non-Christians, specifically Jews, wait for judgment. That's kind of weird. If God has a sense of humor, would you think that he would make you watch the James Bond spoof with the naked dancing Aunt May in the shadows, only to reveal Raken Lore instead? Man, that would be, yeah. I think God does have a sense of humor because God created humor. Average Jam says, the only time God has ever spoken to me directly was the day of my salvation. He said, now is the time. There's a long history behind it, but he knew exactly what to say when. And that's sometimes all it takes. Sometimes we get a feeling or a strong sense of a message or something like that. For me, obviously, it was that you're going to marry that woman. But yeah, but other people, they say God talks to them and dictates them the whole day what they're going to do every day. You should have Darren and Dr. Alex on the show someday. That would be a great panel, actually. Darren and Dr. Alex both have great voices and articulate individuals and radically different perspectives from both each other and from me. So I think that would actually be a really good panel, would be me, Darren, and Dr. Alex. And Peter says goof night, but I'm sure he meant good night, or he's German now. Piano Dean says, when Jesus ascended to heaven, what if someone had run up and tried to hang on his foot? Would he have tried to shake them off? Oh, man, that sounds like a super chat animation right there. Yeah. Or have Mr. Miles. Mr. Miles, I would have Mr. Miles on as a guest. I absolutely would, but I know Mr. Miles. Mr. Miles is a true introvert. The reason Mr. Miles does, you can see Mr. Miles is obviously very talented when it comes to video production and editing. He has no interest whatsoever on doing what I'm doing right now. And so, and that's one of the reasons that we work well together, because he's great at the editing side. I am okay at the editing stuff, but I'm better at the actual writing and performing of this stuff. And so together we work well, because Mr. Miles doesn't have a desire to take over the channel and make it the Mr. Miles show, right? And so that's good, because if everybody, it's like if everybody wants the job of one person, then it just gets ugly. I don't want to be working with people that are just thinking of how do I get his job, or how long until I can split off from his channel and do it myself. I'd rather work with someone like Mr. Miles that I feel like we can work together long term and hopefully make a ton of money and have fun doing it. Although the funny thing is, Mr. Miles, you have a great voice, and so a couple of times I've heard it, and so you would make a good guest. But I understand, being an introvert, I'm not gonna put you in that position unless you decided to one day. And let's see. And by the way, I don't know. Let's see. One thing I want to say, and this is just to the caliber of the people that watch this channel and Anti-Trekker. Schromer, This is completely out of context. I'm not 100% sure in what you guys were saying and stuff, but I know you and Aberjam have been going back and forth on some stuff, and you said you're 100% correct. I was not clear on what I posted. My apologies. That is beautiful right there. Why? Because in this nerd community, we can admit that, oh yeah, I could have phrased that better and stuff, and be good with that, right? And so thank you, Stromer, for showing how to have a real conversation. It's fine, dude, about the comments. It's just that you can't misinterpreting bits of information regarding atheism, in my opinion. That's cool. I understand, Luke. And the thing is, atheism is just as personal of an experience as religion is. It's because everybody's atheism is a little different, and everybody tries to define atheism a little differently. And that makes it difficult to have a state. It's just like when people try to think all Christians believe that Adam and Eve rode dinosaurs to Sunday school. You know, it becomes difficult to have a conversation because you have to draw certain assumptions. So the way I look at atheism is it's a positional statement. If I ask the question, does God exist? If your position is that yes, he does, that makes you a theist. If your position is that no, he does not, that makes you an atheist. That's not about saying, oh, I know 100% certain, or I don't know 100% certain. Oh, I'm a soft, I'm a hard, I'm a what. No. If your position is positive, then you're theist. Negative, then you're atheist. Neutral, and you are agnostic. That you make no assumption whatsoever of the existence or non-existence of God. However, as a true agnostic, that kind of a neutral position, you cannot make an argument for either side because the very definition is that you make no assumption to either side. My brother and sister grew up with them, same as I did, but the odd one out. Well, you're odd, that's for sure. And Dr. Alex says, I'm up for it. Absolutely. We will make it happen, Dr. Alex. In fact, I think that's something we should probably talk about maybe in the next couple of weeks, having you and Darren on a Sunday morning. I think would be a lot of fun. Mr. Ross says, absolutely no interest at all. I want to stay out of the spotlight. I know you do it. See, I know you, Miles. An atheist, cosmologist, and creationist Christian. Oh boy, it's like a matter and antimatter. Yep. And I think it'll be fun. If Darren is up for it. I don't know if Darren, if you're still here, let me know. But I will reach out to Darren and see if he's up for it if he's not here now. And let's see. And that's why Luke's correcting him that it's not anti-trick, it's rational roundtable. I know. My split personality, you're right. Daniel says, they better not destroy Earth 89, the Michael Keaton Batman universe entry. If they want me, will you join me in beating the crap out of the WB? No, because I don't. Here's the thing, Daniel. It doesn't matter to me because to me, the WB universe is not. I don't even care about it. That would be like me getting upset because Discovery did yet another canon violation. And it's like, you know what? I don't give a crap about Discovery, you know? Aberjam says, thank you for recognizing Schromer's humility. This live stream is like second church for me, and I love it. Fully agree with your statements. Thank you, Aberjam. Yeah, that's the thing, though. I want to make sure that we are, yes, we have differences of opinion. Yes, we will occasionally fight hardcore. But we should be respectful to each other. We should know that we're all the nerd community. We're all brothers and sisters, regardless if you want to throw the in Christ there for the believers, or we're just brothers and sisters in humanity. So I want to make sure that that absolutely what Schromer said was perfectly appropriate there, and that's how we need to. If we make a mistake or we say something incorrectly or we're just not being articulate, and we can fess up to it, that makes a huge difference. All right, and let's see. Yo says the Rational Roundtable streams are longer than the anti-tricker streams. That's an observation, not complaint. Yeah, well, because we get into deeper topics. I could talk about this stuff all day. I'm going to wrap this up, by the way, in just a minute. But they do tend to go longer because we get into some pretty deep stuff, and I love getting into that deep stuff. And that's why I think having Dr. Alex on and Darren, that'll be a long stream. I ain't gonna lie. That's gonna be one where Dr. Alex and Darren are gonna probably have to, both be drinking a lot to make it through. I'd be happy to be on as well via Skype if you want to. Absolutely, Vile. And that's the thing. We'll start setting that up. But first things first, I got to continue to get things organized. Me and Mr. Miles have to get our production line queued up and stuff for what we're doing, because first priority has to be to keep pushing the anti-checker while we're growing. and make it so that that becomes the backbone of what supports us. And then this just becomes the philosophical icing on said cake. That is almost as painful to type as Mr. Miles' full name. Do we use Hangouts or Discord to do these multiple stream thingies? Well, Hangouts doesn't really exist anymore. Discord would probably not be very efficient. I'm going to there's actually something that they use. I'm probably thinking about the same thing that Midnight's Edge uses, as well as Nerdrotic. I've never used it myself, but it's actually, it's like, I can't remember exactly, it's Stream something, but I'll probably use that. And it's very simple to use, Dr. Alex, because from my side, I set it all up, and then I send you a link. You click on the link, and it through your browser, it accesses your webcam and lets you stream. Is that the Shire behind you? Funny. Very funny. Steve says, even though many Christians will say you have to follow the Bible to be a Christian, while at the same time try saying a relationship, not a religion. Well, there's the religion of Christianity, but to be a Christian requires that you have a relationship. And I know that seems weird, but I think that would be the subject for a whole freaking series of videos on its own. Deep stuff from the man with the poop avatar, yes. And Mr. Miles says StreamYard. I think you might be right. I'll talk to the guys over at Midnight's Edge because they use it every single day. I'm pretty sure you can do it on a phone because even like on Nerdrotic stream, someone was in on a phone, although they were having problems. Vile says, I would be happy to sell any merchandise you have available on the eBay store under consignment if you make some. Well, I'm actually going to start out, because Teespring has a partnership with YouTube, so I'm going to probably put a couple of shirts up through Teespring and see how that goes. If people start buying them, then I'm going to look at other options as far as making my own stuff. Luke says, since your faith is personal and subjective and your beliefs very specific, would you say it affects your views on the universe a lot? Well, honestly, I think that it kind of, because the funny thing is that I've always been interested in cosmology. That's why I'm so jealous of Dr. Alex. You know, if I didn't have dyslexia and I'd done well in school, I would probably be doing the same thing as Dr. Alex. So I don't necessarily think that it changed my views on the universe much, except to say that there's a couple of universal ideas that I patently reject that others do not. For example, the quantum multiverse type of idea, the idea that every time a decision is made, new universes spring into existence where everything that could have happened in each of these individual. I think that's a load of nonsense. And the idea of the cyclical Big Bang, which I know most people don't subscribe to anymore, but that kind of thing I kind of rejected out of hand because of my sincere belief that there is a creator, and so that would negate certain things like that. But as far as the general how the universe works, no, not at all. And Dr. X said I should have my good audio rigged up then. Well, good. And sure, would you agree to call on a personal bias on how you understand the inner workings of the universe? Well, I don't understand all the inner workings of the universe. I have a general high-level view of how that stuff works, and it hasn't changed just because I happen to believe God is behind it. I think that, and I know that people say, God of the gaps, but it kind of is, in that, I understand the functionality behind said universe, behind the curtain, so to speak. Anyway, so I am going, let's see, and Dr. Ox says, cycling bouncing models are out. Most probably you're already on the right track then. Well, very good. So at least we agree on that one. I'm glad to hear that, Doctor. And I tell you, Dr. Alex, you and I could probably talk to you for 20 hours straight just about universal models and stuff and love it. So I warn you, if I ever make it to the UK, you better have a day off because I'm going to be picking your brain like crazy. Bird O'Prey says, if you really believe people just die until the universe ends, how do you explain mediums who are without a doubt in contact with the dead, knowing things no one alive could know? Well, first of all, I don't try to explain mediums because that's not my thing. Now, the biblical answer to that is that it is demonic. That what you are getting is false information. And so And it is StreamYards. Yeah, okay. I wasn't 100% sure, but thanks, Bird. I haven't used StreamYards myself as a host, but I've been a guest on it many times. But that's the general explanation and that's probably part of the reason why the Bible warns people to not consult with said mediums, because you are basically opening yourself up to demonic information. And since the Bible does specifically caution you not to do it, I don't. All right, so I am going to wrap it up there. Don't forget, Vile Mike's video going to come out later tonight. Has some special guest. I don't know who it could possibly be, but I understand that person is a pile of crap. In the meantime, I hope that you all have a great Sunday. And I gotta get off my feet for a little while and then get some freaking work done. And Bird, how would demons know then? Well, I don't know. They're well researched. I'm not an expert on demonology. But anyway, I am going to wrap it up there. And maybe we'll have to dig into that one of these days, Bird. But I don't know where they get their information from. Anyway, have a good one and take care. And don't forget, Bird of Prey is evil. It's just a fact.
You son of a bitch, anti-tracker! 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 You son of a bitch, anti-tracker!